We begin tonight in the Bay of Plenty, where a massive rescue operation is underway following an eruption on White Island at around 2:11 this afternoon. That sent a plume of ash and steam 12,000 feet into the air. Around 50 people were on or around the island at the time of the explosion. At least 20 have been injured. 7 of them are believed to be critical. As we go to air, some people also remain unaccounted for. A mobile triage unit is on its way to the island. It'll bring the injured back to shore, where they will be transported to Whakatāne Hospital. Geonet's webcam on the island shows a number of people standing inside the crater just before the eruption. Commercial fisherman Dan Harvey is out at sea near Pukehina beach, and he described to me what he saw.
I looked over just doing a scan of the horizon and just saw that White Island had no clouds above it, but there was a burst of dark steam coming out of it, and I thought, this is going to turn into something. I kept an eye on it for a minute or two, and it just kept getting bigger. So I rang my wife, took a photo and rang her and said, we're okay if you hear any news about a White Island erupting. We're far enough away that it's not an issue for us, but it was pretty scary for people over there, I would say.
And is it still puffing out smoke and goodness knows what else?
Yeah, it's still pouring steam out, just not in as big a burst as it was. But yeah, it's still making steam at the moment. It just looked like just what you see of a nuclear bomb going off is what it looked like. Kind of was turning into a mushroom cloud, the way it just expanded around itself and then just went straight up into the sky.
At her weekly post-cab press conference a short time ago, the Prime Minister said police were assisting search and rescue.
A number of people are reportedly injured and are being transported to shore. Police are urging members of the public to avoid the Whakatāne Heads and Muriwai Road areas. Muriwai Road is closed from Harvey Street. I do want to just again share this is evolving. At this stage, obviously, does appear to be a very significant issue, particularly the scale of those affected at this stage.
The volcanic alert level on White Island has been raised from 2 to 4. Geonet volcanologist Geoff Kilgour says the initial eruption lasted a few minutes, inundating the crater floor with ash. I asked him how significant the eruption is.
This is on the upper end of what we've seen, so it appears it's still very early to tell how big it actually is until we, in essence, the dust settles. But it's similar to about April 2016, where a plume was generated about the same height. There were some rather substantial rocks that were flown out, and a kind of a ground-hugging flow was sent across the crater floor towards the sea, which is about a kilometre away from the vent. We know that ash has got at least to our camera, which is a bit close to the coast, and we don't quite know exactly how it got there, but either it's fallen out of the sky in a normal ash plume or it's come along one of these ground-hugging flows. But it's about the same size. That's all I can really say for now.
Looking at that web footage, are you able to see where the people on the island are in proximity to where the main eruption has happened?
I can't particularly. I know that there were people on the island, and if we can see them in the camera, then they're probably... I haven't seen the footage myself, so I've had others analyse and see how many people were there, and there's at least a dozen, maybe more, people on the island at least immediately before the eruption. It's very difficult to say the situation, whether or not there are casualties or injuries. It's just a very, very difficult time, and our thoughts go out to those families of people who are there.
I know you're still trying to get all the information, but is it your understanding that those people are near the crater rim?
Well, the tour parties essentially walk up to the crater rim and then sort of back in a loop. They don't tend to stay for too long on the crater rim or right near the crater rim, so And there are lots of really large boulders and topographic features that people can hide behind, and really that's the only thing that we hope that people have been able to get out of danger.
Have you been able to speak to anyone on the island?
No, and we're essentially going through the scientific information that's come from the island, the images and the sensor information that we have, and so we're just trying to piece that together so we can help as many people as we can. But as for people contacting, that wouldn't necessarily go through us. That probably should be going through National Emergency Management,
so
the former McNem. Yep.
So the steam and the ash that is coming out in this explosion, what can you tell us about that? Would it be hot, and what kind of temperature?
Well, it would be hot. We know that the fumaroles out there are around about 120 degrees, something like that. And the rocks that were thrown out in previous eruptions have been very, very hot. They've had liquid sulfur oozing out of them, so at least 120, probably 150 degrees, up to 150 degrees. So it really depends on how concentrated the ash is that's being thrown out or flowing along the crater floor. But it can be very, very hot, and we know that there are often, from overseas examples, a lot of casualties and severe injuries from these types of events.
Was there any warning prior to this intense eruption?
Well, what we'd seen on the island is a period of heightened activity. So the main fumarole had been sending out these jets of mud and steam, and that had really been quite a departure from normal activity, and that probably started a few weeks ago. I can't quite remember exactly when, and so that was really a sign to us that something was changing, not necessarily an eruption impending, but that the activity had slightly increased, and so that's why we put up the alert level to alert level 2, which says that there's moderate to heightened levels of unrest.
So with alert level, sorry to interrupt, with alert level 2, is it still safe to take tours? When you started to see this increased activity, was there any discussion around stopping people visiting the island?
That's not a decision for us to make, and alert level 2 is simply saying that there's moderate to heightened levels of unrest.
And what level of alert are we at right now?
So we're at level 3 now. So we have 2 levels of unrest, level 1 and level 2, and obviously because of this eruption we've moved to level 3, which is essentially a minor volcanic eruption has occurred.
Are your cameras still working there?
They are, yes. Yep.
And what are they showing you now?
There's some that are clearing, so there's still a bit of ash in the atmosphere, but we can at least see from just above the vent area, we can make out a seriously enlarged vent area where there's a significant amount of steam coming out of it. It's obscuring the exact view into the vent, but we can't see the main crater floor. Those are still obscured by ash, which are probably plastered onto the camera screen.
Do you have anyone en route there, or who is there now?
We don't, and I'm not aware of essentially the emergency response operation. We're just trying to unravel what's going on here and whether or not activity is continuing, i.e. an eruption is still potential, and this is obviously possible.
Yeah, so what is your data telling you about that? Can we expect more and worse, or is this it?
So what it looked like from at least the initial understanding of the eruption is that the event was essentially a short burst of activity, and since that burst, the the seismic activity is diminished quite a lot. So we can't see a continual ramping up of activity and then a burst and another one and another one. We've only seen one event. Yeah. So it's the most likely scenario, and it's certainly by no means the only one, but the pressure was essentially building up in the system, in the hydrothermal system, where essentially the cracks or the open spaces are being clogged by minerals and other things, that essentially the pressure has been able to build up behind that ceiling, and then it's cracked and burst and generated this eruption. And now, because that seal is no longer there, we should be essentially releasing that pressure valve. So it's by no means the only scenario, but it's probably the best analogy that we can really portray, is that we think that this event is probably a one-off, but we can't rule out the fact that more activity could happen. And these things are very, very, very difficult to predict and essentially impossible to predict.
So in terms of the explosion that we have had now, was there anything that you saw in the weeks leading up to this that would have led you to predict this today?
No. We would say that there's a slight pressure increase in the fumarole, the main fumarole, but certainly this event has not been able to be predicted, and this is a global problem for all of us as volcanologists. It's really impossible to say how much pressure can build up in a system before it fails and generates an eruption. For us, it's easier if we know that magma is on its way to the surface, because we can see escalating activity, we can see changes in chemistry. But in this case, we're essentially filling up a balloon and then waiting for that balloon to burst. And so it's essentially impossible for us to predict. But that's why we put the alert level up to 2, because there was a lot of uncertainty that we had, and also we felt that the pressure in the system is slightly increased, but we couldn't tell that this was going to happen.
And that's Geonet volcanologist Geoff Kilgour speaking a short time ago. The police will be holding a press conference at 6:30 tonight. We'll stay on air for it, and we'll bring you details as they come to hand. Just to recap, we know that a mobile triage unit is headed to White Island, that the explosion happened at around 2:11 this afternoon. A webcam showed sightseers very close to the crater in the minutes before that explosion. And eyewitnesses say they saw plumes of steam and debris firing into the air, 12,000 feet into the air, GNS says. It was the shape of a mushroom cloud. There are people who are still unaccounted for. We believe that there were around 50 people on or near the island at the time of the explosion, and 20 people are understood to be injured, some of them serious and some of them with burns. As you would have heard in that interview there, the duty volcanologist saying that debris from volcanic eruptions like this can be around the temperature of 120 to 150 degrees.